We're going to focus a little bit on vocals. I have a lot of people ask me how to deal with compression in vocals. Well, let's focus on lead vocals here, and I'm going to teach you some techniques to get you going quickly using compressors. Now, vocals are one of the most dynamic instruments. And what that means is vocals can be very quiet or very loud in the same song. And how do you make that work in a mix? Well, here's what you do. Compression on the insert is going to tighten up the dynamics so that it works better with other instrumentation. Now, how you set it is of supreme importance to how well it's going to work. And let's take a look at that. Now let's have a listen to an audio example we're going to use here. And right now the compression is off. We're just going to hear raw track so we can really focus on how to set the compressor. Let's have a listen.
The clock's been ticking time away. The moon's my only friend. I'm lost beside this highway. Is this...
Okay, now what will the compressor enable us to do? Well, it'll enable us to sit the vocal on top of the mix so that it stands out clearly without being awfully loud or getting lost in some places. And the way it does that is it's going to bring up some of the quiet passages and tighten the peaks. So the overall dynamics are going to be tightened up. And the trick is doing that where it still remains musical. Let's have a listen again.
The clock's been ticking time away. The moon's my only friend. I'm lost beside this highway.
Okay, now I've turned that on, and I have it set in a very subtle way, even though it's actually tightening up the dynamics quite a bit. You may have noticed when I turned it on, it didn't sound that different. And that's what you want. You don't want it to sound dramatically different. You don't want to deaden the dynamics. So now I want you to watch and listen as I change some of the settings as the song progresses. Then I'll explain to you why and what.
The clock's been ticking time away. The moon's my only friend. I'm lost beside this highway. Is this where my story ends? I'm walking with my shadow, but my feet don't touch the ground. I'm walking.
Now that's a decent setting. And here's what we did. We lowered the threshold just enough to be sending enough of the signal through the compressor. We're sending quite a bit at this setting on purpose, and because we're using a lower ratio setting. In other words, the amount that's being compressed, once it passes through the compressor, the threshold level of the compressor is actually quite subtle compared to some of these higher levels. And you can see on the right there, the amount of dynamics. Here's the threshold level. Once it passes that, the higher I set this, the more of the dynamics going to be brought down. Understand? That's the ratio setting. The lower, a lesser amount of dynamics are being brought down. So we want to keep it very musical. So for this style of music, we're going to use a very low setting. Now, if this was heavy metal or hard rock, we would go for a higher ratio and probably also a higher threshold just to keep it sounding musical again. Now, the makeup is, the more ratio you use, the more you tighten the dynamics, the makeup will allow you to bring it back up again to a suitable level. The attack is how quickly the effect takes place. Sometimes you want a very fast setting, sometimes slower. The key is to keep it sounding musical. And the release time helps with that. You want it to hold long enough, but not so long that it becomes deadened. If you get a very long release time, it can sound very dull. So you want it to be long enough to sound natural, but not so long to sound dull. Now, let's hear that again.
The clock's been ticking time away. The moon's my only friend. I'm lost beside this highway. Is this where my story ends? I'm walking with my shadow, but my feet don't touch the ground. I'm walking with your shadow.
Now we put some reverb on that. And one thing you'll notice about compression is once it's set right, other effects will sound better as well. This is just a quick guide to get you up and going. But keep in mind, vocals are dynamic. Good reason to use a compressor.